Mama Max used to be one of my favorite YouTubers. He kind of fit into that Nexpo, barely sociable niche where they covered weird internet mysteries. But he kind of had this unique gimmick where he was just really fucking edgy and had really good editing. One of my proudest accomplishments in life will always be that I didn't like Mama Max before it was cool to not like him. I used to watch this guy all the time back when he was doing like the weird, creepy Nexpo-like mysteries, but eventually he kind of became one of the worst things you can become. And that's cringe. He became very cringe. For people who don't know who Mama Max was like he said, for people who don't know who Mama Max is, he was this YouTuber who covered kind of weird, creepy topics on the internet. He got kind of big from doing like Japanese cult videos or, you know, the classic weird haunted video game trope. But eventually he started to really delve into hunting pedophiles. First thing, like, YouTube is instantly going to demonetize you the moment you say pedophile. So that probably made the subject matter hard to talk about. But also, it's kind of a delicate subject. But eventually he started switching to like Chris Hansen pedophile hunting type content, but keeping that same extreme edge he always had. But eventually that edge kind of turned into something else. It turned into just Hotline Miami LARPing, which is someone who has an unhealthy obsession with Hotline Miami. Like, I own the jacket and it sits right next to my drive jacket obsession. It felt really weird. Seeing this guy talk about like real life pedophiles and rapists, all while dressing up as a video game character, kind of felt icky, to say the least. I don't know, like I don't want to see someone dressed up as like Mario talking about a murder case. Is that ridiculous? Is that stupid to say? And now Mama Max is going through a lot right now, like a lot. And I know his weird obsession with Hotline Miami really isn't that important in the grand scheme of controversies he's in. But it's very important to me. And I've been holding this topic in for years. I kind of stopped watching him right before the YouTube pick a side thing happened. And obviously when that blew up, all I was doing was looking in the comments, waiting for someone to mention how cringe it is. And no one ever did. And it drove me fucking insane. So really, for me, this is just something I've been wanting to talk about for years that I feel like no one else really is. But more importantly, I want to talk about how Mama Max doesn't seem to understand Hotline Miami, like, at all. Like, if I didn't have footage of him playing the game, I almost feel like I wouldn't think he's ever played the game at all. Hotline Miami is a gory twin-stick shooter, very 80s new wave inspired aesthetic. The general gameplay is walking into a building, killing an ungodly amount of people, and then getting back in your car. You have all of these different masks to choose from, all of which give you a different little perk or special ability to use. And that really became like the game's main calling card, is all of these masks. And apparently Mama Max fucking loves it, because nearly every time he does any bit of video, it's usually wearing a mask. Like, straight up inspired by Hotline Miami. I'm not like a genius by pointing out that Mama Max obviously is inspired by Hotline Miami. I mean, he's even said it himself that his whole, like, cinematic universe is inspired by Hotline Miami.
So, the Mama Max universe was a cautionary tale that takes place in a dystopian future where child predators have seized global power, exploiting the digital landscape to entrench their rule. Rising from the ashes of a society that failed to protect its most vulnerable, the children emerged. A covert network of vigilantes inspired by the style of Hotline Miami. Once victims, they are now hunters of the monsters who hurt children.
Which inspired is maybe it's a light way of phrasing it, I would think. The main point I really want to come across is that for someone who seems so obsessed with a piece of media, I feel like all of the points that Hotline Miami tries to make just completely go over Max's head. It may not look like it from just looking at the game, but Hotline Miami is actually a huge critique on violence in media, with the first game's major theme being why do we like violence in media? It doesn't really ever shame you for liking violence in media, but it genuinely asks you, what part of this do you like? But this results in probably the most iconic line from Hotline Miami, which of course Max has already used, of, do you like hurting other people? And this is almost the entire thesis, or I guess question, Hotline Miami asks the player. It knows that it's just a game, but it wants to ask you if you enjoy the gameplay for the gameplay's sake, or if you enjoy the gameplay through the idea of violence. If the mechanics were all the same, but the aesthetic of the game changed to where this is like the craziest farming game you could ever imagine, would you still be interested? And I think it's a very good question to ask, especially with how games have kind of been for the past however long games have existed. And while you can debate with the thesis, you can argue that yes, obviously, just because I play a game with violence doesn't mean I am a crazy psycho murderer. It's hard to argue that that's the point of Hotline Miami. It wants you to think of why you enjoy violence in video games. The problem with Hotline Miami is it's very ambiguous. It doesn't really hold your hand at all, and this is something I like. I don't want the game to hold my hand. I like that the game leaves you up to interpretation. Hell, maybe my interpretation's even wrong, I don't think it is, but I'm sure you can argue different points out of it. And this naturally led to a lot of fans of Hotline Miami not really understanding the point of Hotline Miami. And this isn't me trying to be a prick and say, I'm one of the true fans who actually understands what the developers are trying to say. But that's kind of the point of the entire second game. Nearly every single playable character in Hotline Miami 2 represents some type of fan of Hotline Miami 1. From the obvious characters, the fans, being people who just like the aesthetic of Hotline Miami and kind of want to live out that fantasy of killing and murdering in Hotline Miami, to Manny Pedro, a detective whose twist is that he's a serial killer who constantly lives in the shadow of Jacket, which to me reads as all of the indie games that were inspired by Hotline Miami 1 and just imitated it with no other fruits added to it. And originally this whole essay was going to be about how I think Max resembles the fans of Hotline Miami 2. I think that's the easiest way out of this of, hey, Max dresses up like the characters of Hotline Miami and just likes hurting people. But when all of these leaked calls started to come out, Max said something that kind of instantly rang a bell in my head.
People have been saying that your investigations kind of skew the line between fact and fiction because they're finding things that you've created as context for the video. How much of what you do is kayfabe and how much of it is legitimately like live, this is the investigation, here it is?
The investigations themselves are real, but obviously the films have fictional elements. Like, it's a film, I am presenting it as if it were to be real, but I didn't think people would take it as that. Like,
but wait, you hunt pedophiles. You don't think that people are going to think your videos are real?
So that's the thing. So I want everyone, when you watch my video, to assume everything is fake, except like when I show a people's face and what they're doing.
This is almost exactly what the character of Martin Brown says in Hotline Miami 2. Martin Brown is the first character you play as in Hotline Miami 2, with the opening tutorial being an in-universe movie called Midnight Animal, where Martin Brown stars as the main character, the pig killer, and recreates a dramatized version of Hotline Miami 1. It's a lot gorier, it's a lot more graphic, and the role of girlfriend from Hotline Miami 1 seems a bit different in this. Martin Brown is the first playable character in Hotline Miami 2, Martin Brown is some prestigious actor who everyone seems surprised is even taking this role in Midnight Animal, as it seems beneath him. During the tutorial, you can see that this movie is barely capturing anything that happened in the first game. It's basically boiling the first game down to just mindless killing and sexual assault, and that's kind of your first look into Martin Brown. You don't really know anything about him. It's not until later in the first act where you really start to see who he is as a person. During a talk show interview promoting the movie, it seems like Martin's stress kind of starts to finally boil over as he reveals why he really wants the role. Martin doesn't care about acting. Martin doesn't care about his awards. He doesn't care about this project. He just wants to live out the fantasy of killing, murdering, and torture. Everything else was just a means to an end, with his justification being, it's just a movie. It doesn't really matter. This is definitely the developers making fun of the people who played the first game and used it as some type of actual violent release. Martin represents the people who liked Hotline Miami because they liked the thrill of killing people. And it's kind of fucked up that that's where Max fits in. See, whereas the fans just want to live out the fantasy of being Jacket, Martin wants to kill. And I think that's really the difference. And this might all sound dramatic and insane, but I just want to point out a few videos that Max has uploaded.
The very hotel he was staying at, and made a phone call to confirm. Afterward, I left instructions for the children in Mexico who had every desire to go see the famous Ham's son in the flesh.
This guy's leading that we should just be pulling them out of their houses and executing them on the street.
And I want to be the one to do something about it and make other people like me who like violence to stand up for what's right. Like I want to, y'all know what I want. I say it in the uncensored version.
To send me a picture of their face that I then publish to all of you, who will decidedly grant these predators the most
delightful dreams
they could never even fathom. There really is no other option. Is there, children?
There are people who will literally kill for me, you know, specifically the more dangerous you guys. You know who you are.
Well, there's a few I got emails about. Can't talk about that, but just know that justice has been served.
Kill for me.
Justice has been served.
And now I'm not trying to say Max is a murderer, and I'm not trying to say Max is getting people killed. But I do want to say Max is implying that, and that he seems to get a thrill out of it. This is fucking insane, by the way. Well, you might say that these people are pedophiles. My counter-arguments are, first of all, why does Max get to play judge, jury, and executioner? And I also want to point out that this is the guy who calls people pedophiles the moment he starts losing an argument. This is fucking insane. So why is Max like this? I think Max's Hotline Miami LARP did just start as a reference to, hey, Hotline Miami looks cool. Let me add it to my little aesthetic. But I think as time went on and his videos got edgier and edgier and people just seemed to praise him with no thought thrown into it, I think Max genuinely started to become obsessed with the idea of being this Hotline Miami type murderer. And now that he's flat out admitted that his videos are just films that shouldn't be taken seriously, this all feels even worse. It feels like he's using real-life pedophile and sexual assault cases to just fuel his ego of playing Hotline Miami, which is disgusting, by the way. I think the moment that Max started getting praised for this little Hotline Miami LARP, it was kind of all over for him. Max seems like the type of guy who needs to be a hero. I mean, he's even said this himself. This isn't just me inferring. But I think he also wants to look like a badass who beats the shit out of pedophiles and gets people killed if they cross the law. And the problem with that is you can't really do both. Which is why he kind of has to talk about pedophiles. It's one of the few things people feel justified in saying this person should die and whoever does it is a hero. Not that I agree with that, but I think that's where Max sits. While Max's channel may be dying, and I think that's genuinely for the best, this guy seems like he will only ever do harm to the world, Max might have actually genuinely let pedophiles get away through his own actions. By fueling his own ego and trying to LARP as a Hotline Miami character, there's a good chance people who did very serious, horrible things are going to walk away scot-free. And I'm not trying to put any blame on Hotline Miami. This is not a failure of the game itself. At the end of the day, anyone should be able to watch a piece of media and not come out of it thinking they need to murder someone. Any reasonable person knows that's not what media is trying to tell you. Hopefully. This is a complete failure of media literacy on Max's part. And I just think it's amazing that you can take these games and just blatantly steal from them. Take their aesthetic, take their unique designs, make your profile picture one of the sprites of the game, make their logo a logo of your own name. Just straight up use modded levels as B-roll because you're too lazy to move a camera. And do all of this, all while not even realizing what the game is trying to say.